I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Nalini Singh. She is the Executive Director of the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. With over 25 years of experience working with women's rights organizations, Ms. Singh navigates a unique landscape where formal state laws often coexist with traditional justice systems. Ms. Singh, through your regional work, particularly in the Pacific, with women's rights organizations and community-based movements, you have long highlighted how women's experience justice in practice across diverse contexts. What trends are you seeing in how women navigate between formal and traditional justice systems? And what do these patterns tell us about why formal pathways to justice continue to fall short for many women? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. From a Pacific regional perspective, women do not experience justice as a single institution or pathway. Justice is lived as a continuum of systems: formal law, customary governance, faith-based authority, and family negotiation. And women move between these spaces in a highly strategic ways. One of the clearest regional trends that we see is that customary and community-based justice mechanisms remain the primary entry point for most women, particularly in rural, remote, and outer island contexts. In some countries, village councils, chiefs, church leaders, and family mediators are often the most accessible authorities. They're geographically closer, faster, less costly, and embedded in daily life. At the same time, women are very clear-eyed about the limitations of these mechanisms. Across the region, particularly in cases of family violence and sexual violence, customary processes frequently prioritize reconciliation, compensation, or restoring harmony between families over women's safety and accountability for the harm. For example, women in some countries regularly describe pressure to accept informal settlements, including compensation payments, even in cases involving serious violence, with little regard for their own ongoing risk. As a result, women do not simply choose one system over another. They navigate between them. Many women begin in community forums to see whether a matter can be resolved quietly or quickly. Some turn to formal law when violence escalates or when community processes fail. Others disengage altogether when the social and personal costs become too high. This movement is not confusion. It's a rational response to constrained and uneven options. A second major regional trend is that formal justice systems remain structurally inaccessible. Even where legal frameworks are relatively strong, several countries, including mine, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Papua New Guinea, have enacted progressive legislation on domestic violence and sexual offences. Yet, women consistently report that legal recognition does not translate into justice in practice. Distance to courts, costs of transport, limited legal aid, language barriers, and prolonged delays all undermine access. In outer islands of some of our large ocean states or rural and remote areas, reaching a court may require travel of several days and significant expense. But equally significant are the social and relational barriers. In small island contexts, police officers, magistrates, and court staff are often socially connected to perpetrators or their families. Confidentiality is fragile, and reporting violence can expose women to retaliation, economic hardship, or even community ostracism. This leads to a critical insight for policymakers in that the formal justice fails not only because of capacity gaps, but because of trust deficits. When institutions perceived are unsafe, unpredictable, or socially risky, women will avoid them, regardless of the rights guaranteed in law. A third pattern we see across the Pacific is the continuity of gender power across both formal and informal systems. Decision-making authority remains overwhelmingly male, whether in village forums, church structures, or courtrooms. Women are often present as complainants or witnesses, but rarely as decision makers. Their credibility is frequently questioned and their experiences reframed through norms that prioritize family unity and community cohesion over individual rights. Women have spoken about being discouraged by police or community leaders from pursuing cases, particularly when perpetrators are respected men or primary income earners. This continuity of patriarchal norms helps explain why moving a case from customary setting to a formal court does not automatically deliver a different outcome. Taken together, these patterns tell us three important things. First, legal reform alone is insufficient. Laws are not socially legitimate, laws that are not socially legitimate, institutionally supported, and practically accessible will not deliver justice for women. Second, women value justice that is safe, timely, and relational, not only justice that is legally correct. When formal systems cannot guarantee protection, dignity, or meaningful remedies, women will continue to rely on informal mechanisms, even when mechanisms are deeply flawed. A third point is that justice systems cannot be strengthened in isolation from the social context in which they operate. In the Pacific, kinship, and tenure of faith, community cohesion shape justice outcomes. Ignoring these realities weakens reform efforts rather than strengthening them. So, from a regional perspective, the way forward is not about choosing between formal and customary systems, but about reconfiguring how they interact with women's lived experiences at the center. This includes investing in community level prevention and accountability, supporting women's leadership across justice institutions, strengthening safeguards when cases between systems, and ensuring that formal justice is not only legally sound but socially trusted. Ultimately, Pacific women are not asking for abstract rights, they're asking for justice systems that work in practice, not just in law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nalini Singh. I just want to thank all the panelists for their very thoughtful and very important reflections, which of course underscore the diversity of contexts across Asia and the Pacific, while emphasizing as well common patterns in how justice pathways are opening or narrowing for women and girls. Now, building on what we've heard, I would like to now invite all panelists to sort of look ahead. So for this second round, I'll pose a single question to all panelists, and I apologize due to time constraints, if you could just take about 1 to 2 minutes to respond to this question. So looking across Asia and the Pacific, what is the one pressing regional trend affecting women's access to justice that you believe is both urgent and actionable within the next 5 years? Could I be
I think I'd like to focus on the growing gap between legal rights on paper and justice in practice, especially when it is in concern for women experiencing violence. Over the past decade, we have seen many countries in the region who have enacted progressive laws on domestic violence, sexual offences, and family law. So, on paper, protections have expanded. But in practice, women continue to face fragmented systems, weak enforcement, and high personal risk when they seek justice. That gap is not abstract. It shapes whether women report harm, whether cases proceed, and whether violence is prevented from reoccurring. So, what makes this trend urgent is that women are increasingly navigating multiple systems at once: the police, courts, customary authorities, religious leaders, administrative bodies, with little coordination between them. And women often fall through the cracks as cases are referred, deferred, or informally resolved, particularly in contexts where reconciliation is prioritized over accountability. What makes it actionable within the next 5 years is that we already know where the failures occur. Across the region, most decisive points are first response and case handling, how police receive complaints, how protection orders are issued and enforced, how cases move between the formal and informal systems, and how women are kept safe during that process. These are not abstract reforms, they are operational ones. If governments and partners focus on strengthening frontline institutions, investing in survivor-centered procedures, improving coordination between justice and social services, resourcing women's rights organizations that support navigation of these systems, we can significantly narrow the gap between law and lived justice. In short, the urgent regional task is not to create any more laws, but to make existing laws work for women safely, consistently, and in practice. And perhaps now is the time to reiterate the call that comes from our recently concluded Asia-Pacific Civil Society Forum on CSW70, which is that perhaps it's time for a decade dedicated to access to justice so that we can have better results and outcomes for women.